Hello there. It's nice to see you again. I'm just sitting here. I got myself a new comfy chair. And, well, it looks like we're on chapter 4 of the picture of Dorian Gray. Now, we left off last time on a little bit of a crazy note with the character of Dorian Gray suddenly being engaged to be married to a woman who he just met. A woman who he seems to be incredibly infatuated with. An actress at a local theater. Well, how about we get a little bit further in and see what's going on? I suppose you've heard the news, Basil, said Lord Henry on the following evening, as Hallward was shown into a little private room at the Bristol, where dinner had been laid for 3. No, Harry, answered Hallward, giving his hat and coat to the bowing waiter. What is it? Nothing about politics, I hope. They don't interest me. There's hardly a single person in the House of Commons worth painting, though many of them would be better for a little bit of whitewashing. Dorian Gray is engaged to be married, said Lord Henry, watching him as he spoke. Hallward turned perfectly pale, and a curious look flashed for a moment into his eyes, and then passed away, leaving them dull. Dorian, engaged to be married? He cried. Impossible! It's perfectly true. To whom? To some little actress or the other. I can't believe it. Dorian is far too sensible. Dorian is far too wise not to do foolish things now and then, my dear Basil. Marriage is hardly a thing that someone can do now and then, Harry, said Hallward, smiling. Except in America. But I didn't say that he was married. I said that he was engaged to be married. There's a great difference. I have a distinct remembrance of being married, but I have no recollection at all of being engaged. I'm inclined to think that I was never engaged. But think of Dorian's birth and position and wealth. It would be absurd for him to marry so far beneath him. If you want him to marry this girl, tell him that, Basil. He's sure to do it then. Whenever a man does a thoroughly stupid thing, it's always from the noblest of motives. I hope the girl is good, Harry. I don't want to see Dorian tied to some vile creature who might degrade his nature and ruin his intellect. Oh, she is more than good. She is beautiful, murmured Lord Henry, sipping a glass of vermouth and orange bitters. Dorian says she is beautiful, and he's not often wrong about things of that kind. Your portrait of him has quickened his appreciation of the personal appearance of others. It has had that excellent effect among others. We are to see her tonight, if that boy doesn't forget his appointment. But do you approve of it, Harry? Said Hallward, walking up and down the room and biting his lip. You can't approve of it, really. It's some silly infatuation. I never approve or disapprove of anything now. It's an absurd attitude to take towards life. We're not sent into the world to air our moral prejudices. I never take any notice of what common people say, and I never interfere with what charming people do. If a personality fascinates me, whatever the personality chooses to do is absolutely delightful to me. Dorian Gray falls in love with a beautiful girl who acts Shakespeare, and proposes to marry her. Why not? If he wedded Messalina, he would alone be none the more interesting. You know, I'm not a champion of marriage. The real drawback to marriage is that it makes one unselfish, and unselfish people are colorless. They lack individuality. Still, there are certain temperaments that marriage makes more complex. They retain their egotism, and add to it many other egos. They are forced to have more than one life. They become more highly organized. Besides, one experience is of value, and whatever one may say against marriage, it's certainly an experience. I hope that Dorian Gray will make this girl his wife, passionately adore her for 6 months, and then suddenly become fascinated by someone else. It would be a wonderful study. You don't mean all that, Harry. You know you don't. If Dorian Gray's life was spoiled, no one would be sorrier than yourself. You are much better than you pretend to be. Lord Henry laughed. The reason we all like to think well of others is that we are all afraid of ourselves. The basis of optimism is sheer terror. We think that we're generous because we credit our neighbor with those virtues that are likely to benefit ourselves. We praise the banker so that we may overdraw our account and find good qualities in the highwayman in the hope that he may not spare our pockets. I mean everything that I've said. I have the greatest contempt for optimism. And as for a spoiled life, no one is spoiled but the one whose growth is arrested. If you want to mar a nature, you have merely to reform it. But here is Dorian himself. He'll tell you more than I can. My dear Harry, my dear Basil, you must both congratulate me, said the boy, throwing off his evening cape with its satin-lined wings and shaking each of the friends by the hand in turn. I've never been so happy. Of course it's sudden, all really delightful things are. And it seems to me that the one thing that I've been looking for all of my life." He was flushed with excitement and pleasure, and looked extraordinarily handsome. "I hope you'll always be very happy, Dorian," said Hallward. "But I don't quite forgive you for not having let me know of your engagement. You let Harry know." "And I don't forgive you for being late to dinner," broke in Lord Henry, putting his hand on the lad's shoulder, and smiling as he spoke. "Come, let us sit down and try what the new chef here is like, and then you will tell us how this all came about." "There really is not much to tell," cried Dorian, as they took their seats around the small round table. "What happened was simply this. After I left you yesterday evening, Harry, I had some dinner with that curious little Italian restaurant down on Rupert Street. You introduced me to it, and went down afterwards to the theatre. Sybil was playing Rosalind. Of course the scenery was dreadful and the Orlando absurd. But Sybil, you should have seen her. When she came on in her boy's dress, she was perfectly wonderful. She wore a moss-coloured velvet jerkin and cinnamon sleeves, slim brown cross-gartered hose, a dainty little green cap with a hawk's feather caught in a jewel, and a hooded cloak lined with a dull red. She had never seemed to me more exquisite. She had all the delicate grace of that Tanagra figurine that you have in your Stoodle, Basil. Her hair clustered around her face like dark leaves around a pale rose. As for her acting, well, you'll see her tonight. She is simply a born artist. I sat in that dingy box absolutely enthralled. I forgot that I was in London in the 19th century. I was away with my love in the forest that no man had ever seen. After the performance was over, I went behind and spoke to her. As we were sitting together, suddenly there came a look into her eyes that I had never seen before. My lips moved towards hers. We kissed each other. I can't describe to you what I felt in that moment. It seemed to me that all my life had been narrowed into one perfect point of rose-colored joy. She trembled all over and shook like a white narcissus. Then she flung herself to her knees and kissed my hands. I feel that I should not tell you this, but I can't help it. Of course our engagement is a dead secret. She's not even told her own mother. I don't know what my guardians will say. Lord Radley is sure to be furious. I don't care. I shall be of age in less than a year, and then I can do whatever I like. I've been right, Basil, haven't I, to take my love out of poetry, to find my wife in Shakespeare's plays? Lips that Shakespeare taught to speak have whispered their secret in my ear. I have had the arms of Rosalind around me, and I've kissed Juliet on the mouth. Yes, Dorian, I suppose you're right, said Hallward, slowly. Have you seen her today? Asked Lord Henry. Dorian Gray shook his head. I left her in the forest of Arden. I shall find her today in the orchard in Verona. Lord Henry sipped his champagne in a meditative manner. At what particular point did you mention the word marriage, Dorian? And what did she say in answer? Perhaps you forgot all about it. My dear Harry, I did not treat it as a business transaction, and I did not make any formal proposal. I told her that I loved her, and she said that she was not worthy to be my wife. Not worthy. Why, the whole world is nothing to me compared to her. Women are wonderfully practical, murmured Lord Henry. Much more practical than we are. In situations of that kind, we often forget to say anything about marriage, and they always remind us. Hallward laid his hand upon his arm. Don't, Harry. You've annoyed Dorian. He's not like other men. He would never bring misery upon anyone. His nature is too fine for that. Lord Henry looked across the table. Dorian is never annoyed with me, he answered. I asked the question for the best reason possible. For the only reason, indeed, that excuses one for asking any question. Simple curiosity. I have a theory that it is always the women who propose to us, and not we who propose to the women, except, of course, in middle-class life. But then the middle classes are not modern. Dorian Gray laughed and tossed his head. You're quite incorrigible, Harry, but I don't mind. It is impossible to be angry with you. When you see Sybil Vane, you will feel that the man who could wrong her would be a beast without a heart. I cannot understand how anyone can wish to shame what he loves. I love Sybil Vane. I wish to place her on a pedestal of gold and see the world worship the woman who is mine. What is marriage? An irrevocable vow. And what is an irrevocable vow that I want to take? Her trust makes me faithful. Her belief makes me good. When I'm with her, I regret all that you have taught me. I've become different from what you've known me to be. I'm changed, and the mere touch of Sybil Vane's hand makes me forget you and all your wrong, fascinating, poisonous, delightful theories. You'll always like me, Dorian, said Lord Henry. Will you have some coffee, you fellows? Waiter, bring coffee and fine champagne, and some cigarettes. No, don't mind the cigarettes, I have some. Basil, I can't allow you to smoke cigars. You must have a cigarette. A cigarette is the perfect type of a perfect pleasure. It's exquisite and it leaves one unsatisfied. What more can you want? Yes, Dorian, you will always be fond of me. I represent to you all of the sins that you have never had the courage to commit. What nonsense you talk, Harry, cried Dorian Gray, lighting his cigarette from a fire-breathing silver dragon that the waiter had placed on the table. Let us go down to the theatre. When you see Sybil, you will have a new ideal of life. She'll represent something to you that you've never known. I've known everything, said Lord Henry, with a sad look in his eyes. But I'm always ready for new emotion. I'm afraid that there's no such thing for me at any rate. Still, your wonderful girl may thrill me. I love acting. It is so much more real than life. Let us go, Dorian. You'll come with me. I'm so sorry, Basil, but there's only room for two in the brougham. You must follow us in the hansom. They got up and put on their coats, sipping their coffee, standing. Hallward was silent and preoccupied. There was a gloom over him. He could not bear this marriage, and yet it seemed to him to be better than many other things that might have happened. After a few moments, they all passed downstairs. He drove off by himself, as had been arranged, and watched the flashing lights of the little brougham in front of him. A strange sense of loss came over him. He felt that Dorian Gray would never again be to him what he'd been in the past. His eyes darkened, and the crowded, flaring streets became blurred to him. When the cab drew up at the doors of the theatre, it seemed to him that he had grown years older. Well, obviously things are starting to turn around. Dorian is extremely passionate and seems to be flip-flopping through personalities. We can only wonder where he's going to go next. That being said, it's about time for me to hit the hay. I hope that you're relaxed, laying down, maybe with something warm to drink. And I'll see you next time.